excited to announce our guest speaker for today. You know, in my journey coming to Aldea and the honor of being able to be lead pastor here, I've just continued to appreciate how rare and unique it is of a space that we get to have here, a place to really experiment and pioneer with what spiritual community could look like beyond dogmatic religion. And I know that so many of us have found belonging here. And again, it's just to realize how unique and how few and far between it is to find other communities doing this kind of work. So when we find other communities and other people who are participating in very similar work, who are hosting and holding very similar types of spaces, it's just incredibly inspiring and encouraging for us. And that is part of what you're going to hear about today. But then on top of it, Cody has a brand new book, something he's poured years of his life into. And though it is a book that is very raw and vulnerable and about his personal journey, I found it to be incredibly universal. When I was reading it, I saw myself in every page as well. And so Cody and Katie have traveled all the way from Atlanta-ish to be here today. And we're so just honored and thrilled. So would you welcome Cody to the stage?
Morning, everybody. Well, let me say a couple of things, and then we'll jump in here. My spiritual collective in Atlanta, I teach for like an hour there. So I came here, I'm like, Jake, like, what's the vibe? How long do you go? He's like, 25 minutes. I'm like, that's an introduction where I come from, all right? But I'm gonna stay on track because I know we've got another gathering coming. Let me say two things, and then we'll jump into what I want to say today. First of all, what a gift. What a gift to have a spiritual collective like this that you all get to gather and be a part of. And I want you to know from Atlanta, we were both in the same article, the Religious News Service article that was passed on to the Washington Post. I got that article, started reading about our own spiritual collective, and then saw this little line that said Aldea. And I was like, what? I don't even know what that word means. And I went and Googled, and I'm like, oh, it's like a village, like a small community. And then I started reading more. And then the next thing I know, Jake and I end up connecting with each other. And it's just been incredibly inspiring because there's not a lot of spaces like ours around the United States. And anytime we meet someone who's doing similar work, what a gift it is. So just for the record, I know that you know this because this is the early service, which means you all are deeply spiritual people, all right? But I want you to know you have been incredibly blessed, and I use that word. I know it's a large word, but to have leadership like Jake in this space. And I'm just so grateful for he and Olivia. And God, it's just as a pastor now for over 20 plus years, mad respect to all of you all, every volunteer. I'm a person that sees all the details. When I walked in, the first thing I did was jet back to the kids area. You know what I'm talking about? I'm like, oh, what's happening back there? Because we are all trying to do the same thing. So just such gratitude for this space. That's where I want to start. Just a space of gratitude. And then second, I'm going to confess something. I've been sleeping on Tucson, all right? It wasn't on my radar to come visit. And then I was talking to Jake, and I'm like, I'm doing this book tour because I released this book right here called Discovering Your Internal Universe. Subtitle, The Unexpected Good News About Anxiety, Panic, and Fear. And so 2 weeks ago, I was in California, a little town called Ojai. You familiar with this town? Santa Barbara, L.A., and then back to Atlanta for the book tour launch, which was last Sunday. And then, so now we're here. And it wasn't on my radar, but my wife and I came up early. So my wife, Katie's here. We've been married 22 years. God, I hope that's right, 22 years. And we came up early, and we did like a little bit of hiking and went up to your mountain and ran into some like native people, and they were playing the flutes. And I was like, I understand why people live here, all right? What's so calming and grounding and the opposite of everything Atlanta is. I looked around in the valley. I was like, oh my God, Katie, just pause. There are no tall buildings. which is like really refreshing. And like there's a spirit in the air here in Tucson. So I want you to know, in many ways, I'm flying back home tomorrow refreshed, and I haven't even met you people yet. Just refreshed, like you do kind of have something going in Tucson. And so hats off to you all for respecting and honoring and cultivating and taking serious our responsibility to steward this space in this land we've been giving. And I've got love for how you honor the natives. And you just don't see a lot of that anymore. And I'm just grateful. Okay, does that feel like a good start? All right. Okay, let's do this. How about I start with a line? Then I'm going to share just like one, maybe two stories. And that's all I'm going to give you from the book. All right. The rest of it, you can purchase after. All right. Now, I don't want to spoil the book for you, so I'm going to do the best I can to kind of skirt around any unnecessary endings that, you don't want to hear. But let me start here. There's an old Cherokee proverb, which I think would be a good place for us to start. It says this: if you listen to your body when it whispers, you won't have to hear it scream. I'll say it again. If you listen to your body when it whispers, you won't have to hear it scream. Now, this is incredibly moving line for me. Many reasons why. One, I wrote this book because I have lived with anxiety since my earliest memory. Now, I'll just pause here. For some of you, this may be brand new. For others of you are like, son, sit down. I could take the mic. I know something about anxiety, all right? I would imagine if you have lived and been alive and have breath in your body the last 8 months in America, been a slight uptick in anxiety, at the very least, right? Yes. I don't know about you, but here's some words that describe the world in which I live in right now. Chaos, upheaval, turbulence. Here's one: incompetence. Are we okay? Am I a safe place here? Okay. Just fill in the vibes, all right? Just fill in the vibes. All right. Oh, thank you. I should tell you, my congregation is about 60% black. And so that means they kind of talk during the teachings. I don't need it, but I will say this: if you just have something in you and you're like you want to say, like, you're like, retweet that line, all right? Like, you can totally scream it out. It's just fine with me, all right? Now, that said, I want to get to what happened to me with anxiety, and then I want to go toward maybe what's happening for all of us as like a collective body, okay? But I've lived with anxiety since my earliest memories. More specifically, I have lived with a panic disorder since my earliest memories. And I write about it in the book. I did not know it was a panic disorder until I was 40 years old. Prior to that, I have spent endless amounts of hours and days trying to understand what was wrong with me. I mean, from first grade forward, when I got up and jetted out of a classroom, and my first grade teacher ran down the hallway and she kept saying, "Cody, what is wrong with you?" That question has stuck with me through my life. What is wrong with me? And I want you to know I've tried everything to figure out what was wrong with me. And it wasn't until I was in front of a therapist at 40 years old when I described 40 years of this experience that I kept having, sometimes multiple times a day. And this therapist looked at me and said, "Cody, has no one ever told you that is textbook definition panic disorder?" And the moment he said it, it's like the lights came on. Oh my God. That is exactly what this is. It is a panic disorder. And I began to sit in that moment going, where do I go from here? For any person in this room who has anxiety, which I would argue everybody has anxiety, the question is not, do you have anxiety? The question is, at what level is it at in your life? 2 weeks ago, I was speaking at an event, and I said, everyone has anxiety. The question is what level? And some guy in the back went, I don't have it. And what I realized is a couple of things. One, my therapist said one time, if you ever meet anyone who says they don't have anxiety, they may be telling the truth, and that's why they're still living in the basement of their parents' home, because they need a little bit of anxiety. You know what I mean? To like kind of motivate and push, like a little bit of stress to pay the bills might be somewhat helpful, right? The other thing is, God forbid, but if an emergency were to take place in this room right now, I guarantee you most of us would immediately flip into fight, flight, or freeze, right? That's anxiety. Now, all of that said, the moment I was diagnosed with a panic disorder, I went to work because I thought, is it possible that after 40 years of having debilitating panic disorders, is it possible that I could be healed? That's the question. Could I eliminate my anxiety? And so I tried everything you could possibly imagine. I tried Jesus because you need to know my dad's a Southern Baptist pastor. Yeah, that's what my insides just said. I went to Emory University, which is in Atlanta, got my Master's of Divinity. But before that, I was raised in an evangelical fundamentalist Christian home. My dad was a Southern Baptist pastor. I got my undergrad from Jerry Falwell School, Liberty. I already like you, all right? Yeah, and some of you are sitting here going, well, I can help with your panic disorder right there, all right? If you were raised in that environment, you probably know something about anxiety. Because what happened is I began to realize the very religion that I was handed, the spirituality I was handed, could have calmed my anxiety. But what I discovered when I went inward is that it actually was the cause of my anxiety, at least a lot of it. Because you cannot grow up in a spiritual household where people say if you die, you will spend your life in eternal conscious torment. And a 9-year-old hear that and not have anxiety. That only makes sense. It's the natural response of a body. Is there a more egregious idea than that idea? And so I tried it all. I tried Jesus. I tried God. I tried prayer. I tried holistic approaches. I tried every therapy you can imagine. I tried diets and supplements. I, to date, now 8 years later, picked up running thinking it would help with my anxiety. I run 6 miles a day every day except Fridays, and I run 15 miles on Fridays. Yeah, and that's just to keep me stable, right? Yeah, I have tried it all. I have tried exercise. I have tried, and I write about this in the book, but I have tried every therapist you could possibly name. You name one, EMDR, you name it, I have tried it, all right? I have gone into the woods with some native guides. I have had experiences of psilocybin. And I will tell you, people, I write about it in the book, but people are like, whoa, do you recommend psychedelic therapy for anxiety? First of all, my therapist said, pause. You better do your research. But if you feel the pull, move into it. And I had one of those experiences. What I tell people all the time is, I can't really explain what happened, but I can tell you this. The closest language I've seen is that I had an experience that the Apostle Paul says in Corinthians. He worded it like this one time. Apparently somebody had an experience very similar, and the Apostle Paul said, I know a man who 14 years ago was taken up to the third heaven. And he said, whether in the body or out of the body, I'm not sure, only God knows. But this individual that was taken up to the third heaven was shown things he is not permitted to say to humans. And one time I read that after an experience, and I thought, oh my God, that relates. Now, I'm not saying Paul did mushrooms, okay? But I will say, if it's possible, but if we're going to throw Paul in, I'm also looking at a couple other writers in the Bible, like Revelation, John of Patmos, and Ezekiel, who was clearly doing ayahuasca. All right, now, that said, and if you've ever read the Bible, you know those guys. Now, they were up on a mountain. All right, now, I have tried it all. Let me share with you one quick story because I'm trying to get to the all the way in. So the book breaks down into 3 sections, all the way in, all the way through, and all the way out. And it's my journey of finding out I was diagnosed with a panic disorder and having to learn how to go inside. Because what I learned real fast is that healing will not come from the outside in. It will come from the inside out. And so I realized I was the only one responsible for my own healing. And I must confess to you, this was all new for me growing up as an evangelical. I didn't even know there was a space inside of me that was below my shoulders. Living in the Western world, I've only lived up here. Do you know what I mean? Rational brain. I went to Emory University. They test you up here. And for the first time in my life, my body, because I ignored the whispers of it, began to scream. And this is what I want to tell you about anxiety. It surprised me because it was almost like it became a flare gun shooting up from my, and you can use whatever language you want. I call it internal universe. That space below the shoulders. You can call it the soul. Some people use that word. You can call it the psyche. You can call it the mind, heart, gut, the internal universe, which is that world within you. So you have the external, the world around us, then the internal, the world within us. And what I realized was I needed to go inside that internal world. And anxiety was like a flare gun going off, trying to get my attention, saying, hey, there's some things in here that you've been suppressing, repressing, and ignoring, and it's time we pay attention to it. And so when I went in with war metaphors that I was handed. Because I grew up in a religion that told me anxiety was the enemy to faith. And I can't tell you how problematic that was for me. I was handed war metaphors from my church. I was told fear was the enemy to faith. But what I want you to know, here's what I've discovered. Anxiety is not an indication of weak faith. I was told this growing up, that if you are anxious, it's because you don't have enough faith. I can't tell you how problematic that is with people that live with anxiety. That is the very definition of spiritual abuse. I was also told that what my anxiety and panic attacks were growing up in the church, they called conviction of the Holy Spirit. Do you realize what kind of spiritual abuse that is for a 9-year-old? Who's having experiences inside of a pew in a church because he's hearing sermons on hell, and they're saying, friend, that's not anxiety. That's just God pulling on your heart. Wow. And so what I've discovered over time is that anxiety is not an indication of weak faith, but it might very well be an indication of toxic faith. And I do not believe anxiety and faith are at odds with each other. We have to shift our understanding of this. We're invited to shift our understanding of this. I don't believe anxiety is the enemy to faith. I believe they both belong in the internal universe. In fact, what I write in the book is that I don't believe faith is the absence of anxiety. I believe faith is trust in the presence of anxiety. Because you and I need both. And if you don't believe me, just look around the room. The human species is here because anxiety had a role in keeping us alive. This goes all the way back to caveman, cavewoman, right? Yes, they have kept their lives safe because this amazing thing that we've been given called fear and anxiety. And what an incredible emotion that keeps us alert. And so both sit side by side. And so I tried everything I could imagine to heal my anxiety. And what I discovered along the way is that I needed to go further into it. Now, let me illustrate this, okay? So 2 quick stories. One, I had some friends in our spiritual collective, and I confessed to them that their pastor, a spiritual leader, their fearless leader was being paralyzed by fear. And I had some people come up to me in our spiritual collective, and they said, we've got something that will help you. And I'm like, what is it? And they're like, have you ever had THC? Okay. Now you need to know something about me. I grew up in an austere evangelical home. Friend, the letters THC, you might as well just signed up for hell, all right? Like that's not, I was a spokesman for the DARE program. Are you familiar with DARE? Oh yeah, to keep a kid off drugs, all right? Like, that's what I did. My life was about as pure as the Virgin Mary. You know what I'm talking about? Like, I mean, we had no space for anything like that. So I'd never done a drug in my life. And I'm a grown man. And this was like 5 years ago. For the first time, someone said, "You've never tried THC?" I'm like, "I never have." They're like, "It's a God-given gift that we have. You should try it." And I'm like, "Maybe I should." They're like, "It will help you." I'm like, "Fantastic." And so next thing I know, they dropped a little plastic bag of gummies that were just sitting on my doorstep. And by the way, they attached no notes to it for anyone. For any dealers out there, let me just like help you. Please, God, leave a note with a little bit of instruction. And so I got the bag and I'm like, this is fantastic. And I had enough sense, because I did Google a little bit on my own, had enough sense. They said, if this is your first time trying it, cut it in half. So I love that when you're like, right, we know who you are, all right? So I cut it in half and I took it and I just sat on the couch like, man, all right, edible, like, do your thing. Like, I'm open, take me. And about an hour and a half later, it's just nothing. I mean, as if it didn't faze me. And I did what many of you think I probably did. I pulled the ultimate rookie move. I was like, didn't work, I need to take more. So I went back to the fridge, grabbed the second half, threw it in. And I'm like, still not really feeling it. Maybe just like a little bit more. And then I was like, it's just not working. But honestly, for me, that kind of makes sense. My body's a little weird. I'm like, yep, this is just how it works. It just doesn't work for me. You know, I mean, I fell into my own melodrama. You know what I'm talking about? Like, oh, woe is me. THC doesn't help, all right? I went to bed. And some point in the middle of me, I assume it was sleeping. I'm not sure. But all I know is I woke up. My wife's sitting beside me in the bed. And we have a chair in the corner of the room. And I woke up and I look over. Have you guys ever seen that movie Monsters, Inc.? I woke up. There's a character on Monsters, Inc. called Mike Wazowski. He's the one-eyed green monster. I woke up to Mike sitting in a chair in the corner of my room. But Mike wasn't green. He was red, right? And this character, Mike, I looked up and I was like, wait, is this really happening? Am I asleep or am I awake? And I couldn't tell. Like, I was like, I can't even tell, which already the alarms were going off, like something's not right here. But I look over at Mike and all of a sudden I felt my heart start to race. And I was like, uh-oh, here we go. I know what this is. And I went into a full-blown panic attack, right? And all of a sudden I see Mike and he moves from the corner of that chair, and I mean one-eyed Mike, right to my face. And he's leaning in, looking at me. And it was like, oh my God, I'm like, what is happening? Full-blown panic attack. And I need you to know this. I couldn't get out of the attack. So I'd have them, then it'd stop for a second, then I'd have another one. And the thing about THC that you probably already know, but you need to know, you can't leave that meeting when you want to. It's not like alcohol. You're like, a cup of water, I'll be fine. Nope. When you sign up for that meeting, they lock the door behind you. And it isn't over until they decide it's over, whoever they are, right? The gummy gods, right? So I had a 4.5 hour on and off panic attack experience. I took those things to go the opposite direction. But what I found is it threw me right into the heart of it. Now, I woke up the next morning, I went downstairs, opened up my fridge, grabbed the bag of gummies, threw them away, and I was like, never again. A couple lessons I learned. First, kids, test your drugs, okay? Second, maybe this thing I was handed did for me the very thing I needed it to do for me. See, I thought I needed an escape from anxiety, but in many ways, this, like THC, pushed me into the anxiety. It made me come, check out the symbolism, face to face with the monster of anxiety. And I had to like stare it down. And this is when it began to occur to me. Maybe the cure to anxiety is inside the anxiety. And what I decided was that I need to go further into the heart of my biggest fear. And what I discovered is maybe anxiety isn't the monster I was told it was. If you know anything about Mike Wazowski, he's like the good monster. And looking back in hindsight, I can just see Mike open his arms right now going, can't we just be friends? I'm not here to harm you. And this is true about anxiety, by the way. I've looked back and realized how powerful that moment was for me because I'm realizing that I have misunderstood anxiety. Anxiety is not here to harm you. It is here to protect you. This is what it does. Now, certainly for people like me, maybe some people like you, it tends to want to take over. But what I have learned in my life is anxiety can have a seat at the table. It just isn't allowed to run the meeting. You know what I mean? Now, all of that said, I went as far as I could into the heart of my anxiety. And I write about all this in the book, but I just want to say a couple of things. One is this. It's not that none of it didn't help. It all helped to lead me to where I am right now. From SSRIs to psilocybin to, by the way, I should throw this out, Wachuma, which, by the way, I'm not here endorsing anything, but you people are surrounded by cacti around here. What an amazing God-given plant that was given to us. You have to be careful because they'll poke you, all right? But what a wild experience. I'm just saying, when you're as desperate as I am, when you have panic attacks that are debilitating, man, you run as far as you can to anything that you think can help you. And what I discovered when I went inward is that, here's it is, you don't have to be in an altered state to experience your internal state. Those things are fine and they can be helpful, but what I learned is there are many doors to the internal universe. Many. Imagination, memory, tears, your grief. All of those are doors, opportunities for you to go inward. You are experiencing them, and it's an invitation for you to come, and that's true for anxiety. And so I decided to step foot and go in, and I did it on a regular basis. I found a hypnotherapist, and she began to write me scripts. And she said, for the next 30 days, every night, I want you to play these scripts when you go to bed. And so every night I would go to bed, I'd put in my headphones, and I would pull down my eye mask. Now, I want to say a couple things. My eye mask I now call my internal universe glasses, okay? I brought some. They're on the table out here, by the way. So if you grab a book, you need to grab a pair of that, all right? So if you don't leave here with anything, you leave here with a pair of internal universe glasses. They're going to come in handy for you, all right? And so for 30 days, I pulled down my internal universe glasses and I hit play on this track, and my hypnotherapist invited me into using my imagination. And she said, I want you to go inward and we're going to explore some opportunities and doors. And I would open doors, in a metaphorical way inside of me. And I'd be like, oh, what's in here? I've never explored this inside of me before. Oh, would you look at that? And I discovered so much through 2 to 3 years of hypnotherapy. I discovered layers on layers of unprocessed grief that I never dealt with. I discovered relational wounds that I'd never dealt with before. I went 8 years without speaking to my father and him not speaking to me because of the path that I chose to take in my life that he couldn't handle. I don't see that as a tragedy. I see that as a love story, because you only use that kind of protection when you're madly in love with each other. I found all kinds of things in there. Toxic theology that I had to unlearn. Deep insecurities that were placed in there by my evangelical upbringing, because it turns out if they can get you doubting and not trusting yourself because you're a, quote, wicked person, unquote, then they can get you trusting them. I also found some really good news. Turns out it's actually really good to be human. It's really good to be here. It's really good to be you, and it's really good to be me, and it's really good that we're having this experience together. But then I found something that I want to close with today that shocked me. I kept going inward, and what I found was a version of my 9-year-old self. I wrote this on page 119, and I want to read it to you. I kept showing up using my imagination, and right there I would run into a particular image of my 9-year-old self over and over and over again. And so my therapist just said, well, just approach, see what he might be wanting. So I found him in my childhood home that I was raised in. So for 30 days, I, in Atlanta, got in my car, in my imagination at night with my internal universe glasses on. I got in my car. I drove to a little town called Webb, Alabama, which is where I lived when I was 9 years old. My dad pastored a church called Popular Springs Baptist Church. It was just as amazing as you might think, all right? And so I got in my imagination, I drove in, and I would pull up to my childhood home, and there at the front door, when the moment I would pull up, would be my 9-year-old self looking out the glass door at his 40-year-old self. And I did that routine over and over and over again. And so I want to read this to you. My inner child did not need more informed theology, a new story, an explanation of anxiety, affirmation about the afterlife. What he needed was me. What I needed was him. What we needed was love. We needed to feel our way to love. So we sat for 30 days staring at each other, not saying a word, no distractions, no words, just silence. And what I learned is that trust takes time to build. And by about day 30, I kept getting discouraged, going, everything that I'm doing in this little hypnotic moment is the same. I was wearing the same clothes when I visited him. He was wearing the same clothes when I visited him. He didn't look like he changed a bit. I'm sure he probably looked at me like, you're definitely getting older, all right? And I did this routine over and over and over again until one day I felt the nudge to blur the lines between the external and internal, between the invisible and visible. And so I decided I've got to somehow move out of the internal into the external and integrate this. And so I got in my car, and this isn't my imagination. I got in my car one day and I took a 200-mile road trip to my childhood home. I had not been there since I left there as a child, had no idea if it still existed. My wife went with me. She jumped in the car. We drove up, and I started going, oh my God, this is what I would do in my imagination. And I pulled up to the house, didn't look like anything that I thought in my imagination. It was much smaller. Do you know what I'm saying? I pull up, all the trees were gone that I had in my imagination that I remember as a kid. And then there was a big flagpole, and it had a flag on it, and it was an Alabama Crimson Tide flag, which I was like, well, there could be worse flags, all right? And it was like shooting up, and I was like, well, I got to go knock. And so I got out of my car. I pulled up, I looked at the door, thinking, kind of feeling foolish, because I'm like, what did I think? There was going to be a kid at the door? But I got out of my car, and I walked up, and I knocked on the door, and no one answered. And I was like, okay, we did the best we could. I turned around and walked away, and there was a gentleman that said, can I help you? And I turned around, and I said, oh, this is my childhood home. I grew up here. And he said, no way. I said, yeah way. I grew up here. And he's like, oh. He's like, well, you need to meet his wife comes out. And she's like, oh, tell me. We started making all these connections. She's like, well, you have to come in. First of all, only in the South did they just invite strangers into their home, right? Who just show up like, I grew up here. I'm having some childhood trauma, stuff that I need to work out. Can I come in? And she let me in, and I walked into exactly what I did in my imagination over and over again. And I found my old childhood bedroom, the exact spot where I would sit with my imaginary 9-year-old throughout all of this journey. And I got in that same spot in my childhood home. And these two beautiful adults and Katie were all kind of standing in the room. And I was like, I just need a minute. I just need a minute. And here's what I did. I remember putting my hand on my body, because here's the thing about anxiety. If you sit with it long enough, you can feel where it's at in your body. And mine sits about right here. So I put my hand on my body, and I just remember just saying this mantra over and over again. I've got you. I've got you. I've got you. Now, some call this inner child work. You can call it whatever you want. But those words, I've got you, in that moment, begin to calm this trembling 9-year-old inside of me. But then check this out, and we're done. I felt that I wasn't just holding my 9-year-old. I felt while I was holding my 9-year-old, someone was holding me while I was holding my 9-year-old. And I began to wonder, what is this feeling? Because my 9-year-old got calm, then I got calm, and I thought maybe it's the divine. And then I realized, oh no, this is like a 40-year older version of who I am. So imagine my 80-year-old self holding my 41-year-old self who's holding their 9-year-old self. And then I'm like, this is like a Trinitarian type like dance or something. And then on top of that, I felt love or the divine just embracing all three of us going, hey, here's the word. I've got you. And so I want to say to all of you out Aldea, I know this is a difficult time to be alive. Can we all confess it's scary? Immigrants being pulled off streets. Not to mention Gaza, the Ukraine, the Sudan, Congo. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, and I'm not here to heighten anxiety. I'm here to just tell you why the collective nervous system of our nation is screaming. And I believe there's an invitation in there for us to not run from that anxiety, but move further into it and say, what could this be wanting to say to us? And what is happening right now is our world is being led by ill-equipped leaders in some of our greatest positions of power. And it's scary and it's dangerous. And we have school shootings that aren't even registered anymore because they're so common. And all I want to say to you is this: in the midst of all of that, in the midst of all of your fear, we welcome it. It's a part of us. It just doesn't get to take over. And what I want to say to you, what I've said in this book is simply this: I believe love and the divine is holding us all this morning. And I believe the word for us is, I've got you. I've got you. Aldea, thank you so much for allowing me to be here today.